It's been 19 years since I felt absolute fear. The kind of fear that makes you feel like your heart is going to beat for the last time, and in that moment, it would be for the better. As kids, we would always tell stories of the sparkling man. Anytime we had a bonfire, cookout, or we were just playing outside, somebody would always bring up the sparkling man. He wasn't a scary story that our parents would tell us to make sure we were following rules, and he wasn't an urban legend told throughout the years, with each story becoming more absurd the more folks tell the story. He was the sparkling man. He didn't care that adults didn't believe you when you told them about him. He didn't care how many times you would smash your eyelids together and scream that he isn't real. He was the sparkling man. And now, after 19 years, he's back. I grew up in a small town in North Carolina with my mom, my dad, and my two older brothers. Life was amazing. I was like every other goofy 7-year-old at the time. I loved Pokemon and dreamed of being an architect when I grew up. Dad and I would watch wrestling, and afterwards my brothers and I would reenact it. Our family felt full and complete. Until one day I came home and my father's clothes were thrown across the yard. He had been cheating on my mom for the past 3 years and she was finally kicking him out. Of course, I didn't know any of this and was only told that Dad would be staying in a different house than ours for a little while. I always assumed that my dad would move back in with us, but it was the exact opposite. He stopped coming around. He stopped visiting us after only a couple months, and a few months later would be the last time I ever spoke to him. It was getting close to my 8th birthday, and I remember getting off the school bus and seeing a man in my front yard. The man told me that his name was Richard and that he was a friend of my mom's. Little did I know that only 2 months after that, Richard would marry my mom and move us all into a trailer that he had bought from a friend. I spent the first few days being a recluse, only coming out to eat dinner or when one of my older brothers would drag me out to spend time with them. As the days went by, I started noticing kids playing in the neighborhood. Now, my old neighborhood didn't have any children that were even remotely my age, so I finally worked up the courage to introduce myself after seeing one of the kids was playing with Pokemon cards. I grabbed my binder full of Pokemon cards and headed out the door before hearing a voice from the opposite side of the house where the other kids were playing saying, "He's finally coming outside." I look over to see a kid about my height with brown hair and freckles running full speed in my direction. He stops right in front of me and introduces himself. "Hey, I'm Mickey, and we've all been waiting for you to come outside since you moved in." He introduced me to his 2 sisters and 2 other boys from the neighborhood, Jared and Terry. We became remarkably close over a short period of time, and seeing as it was summer, as soon as sunlight pierced the blinds in my room, I was outside hanging out with my new friends. We'd play the usual games that 8-year-olds play: Red Rover, various forms of tag, Duck Duck Goose. But one game the kids would always want to play was one that I had never heard of. It was called Run from the Sparkling Man. It was kinda like playing hide and go seek, but no one would be looking for us. A random person would just name where the sparkling man was, and we would all run away from that area. I never really questioned the game and would just chalk it up to dumb kids playing dumb games. One evening, my stepdad and Mickey's dad were having a cookout. It was getting dark, and Mickey and I were sitting on a porch talking about things kids liked at the time and fantasizing about Pokemon being real and how cool that would be, and you get the gist. I don't really remember what I was thinking or why I even brought it up, but I decided to ask Mickey who was the sparkling man from the game that we were always playing. He told me that back in the 1950s, there was a house that stood exactly where my trailer stands today, where a quadriplegic man and his mother used to live. He had his bed positioned near the window so he could see the outside, since he was confined to his bedroom for the majority of his life. Of course, the kids in the neighborhood would find that weird and would always yell things at him and throw things at his window. Kids in the 50s were kinda jerks. Well, one night on the 4th of July, some of the kids had grabbed some fireworks and started shooting them off in the neighborhood. One of the kids, Michael, shot off a bottle rocket that went through the quadriplegic man's window and set his house completely on fire. The kids watched as the man screamed, burning alive with no way to leave his room. They say the man didn't even stop screaming to take a breath. He just let out one continuous blood-curdling scream. I immediately stopped Mickey, because how convenient that the man's house stood where my trailer was now, and not only that, but the kid who shot the bottle rocket off was named Michael, which was also my name. Mickey tried to plead that he honestly didn't make the connection, and I just laughed it off. After all, I was a kid who loved horror movies, and I wasn't going to be scared that easily. We started playing Pokemon on his Game Boy before finally eating some barbecue chicken and calling it a night. I was a bit restless that night and decided to hang out in the living room after my mom and stepdad had went to sleep. I was watching a nice collection of infomercials about knives and country music collections before dozing off on the couch. It was about 2:30 a.m. before the planks in the couch dug into my side enough to wake me up. So I got up, wandered into my room, and jumped into bed, throwing my blankets over my whole body in one glorious motion. And as I turned my body to face the wall on my right side, my favorite position, my forehead hit something. I opened my eyes to a man without any skin on his body, laying next to me in bed. His mouth was gaped so far open that his chin touched his chest, ripping his cheeks from ear to ear. And before my 8-year-old mind could even comprehend what I was looking at, he let out a scream that sucked every bit of wind out of my chest. It sounded like a wail from losing a loved one, or like someone was going through the most heinous torture of all time. The only thing I could do was open my mouth and stare him directly in the eyes, before finally letting out a scream that exactly matched his own. When I was 14, I lived on the second floor of my mother's house in a room with a large window. One night I woke up with scratches all over my body, so I went to look in the mirror to see if I had gotten attacked by a cat or something. I left the room, went to the bathroom, and when I came back from the bathroom, I saw a girl next to my bed standing at my window. She was around my age, and as she was escaping through the window, I managed to mentally note that she had reddish hair, one emerald green eye, and one sky blue eye. I tried to catch her, but she jumped out of the window and seemed to straight up disappear. And I mean, like, the moment she left my sight, she evaporated. I found an earring on my pillow, and I kept it in my hand as I went back to sleep. I woke up in the morning thinking the events of the night before could have just been a dream, but I was shocked when I looked down and realized I still had the ring in my hand. However, it didn't belong to anybody I knew that wore earrings. 4 years later, when I was 18, I woke up and felt absolutely horrible. I went to the bathroom to look at what had happened in the mirror, and I was covered in scratches, bruises, and bite marks that were in places that I could not physically bite. When I went back to my room, the exact same girl was standing in my window. She had grown up, and she was about the same age as me now, and she seemed just as surprised to be looking at me as I was looking back at her. I immediately ran at her, and I nearly grabbed her, but she disappeared through the window, and then poof, she was gone again. That time, I found a necklace on my bed. Only a few months later, I wasn't quite asleep, and I heard my window begin to open. I waited for the perfect moment, and then I shot up out of bed, covered the few feet to my window, and was finally able to grab her hand. Now I knew for sure that she wasn't a part of my imagination. She was real. I wasn't sure whether to be comforted by this or just more terrified. She bared her teeth at me like a wild animal and forced me to let go, leaving scratches on the wood frame of my window in the process. The worst part about all of this is that she still shows up sometimes, and I'm nearly 30 years old now. I've been suffering from sleep paralysis for a number of years, and it's been fairly tame up until recently. Shortly after my dad's death, who passed away in early September, the paralysis changed and became far more vivid and terrifying. I am aware that stress, anxiety, and grief can all be factors in triggering or enhancing the problem. I know when it's coming. I sleep on my side, and when it starts, a low pressure creeps from my shoulder down to my chest. And after that, I would usually experience the odd moving shadow, a loud bang, or a whispering kind of voice in my room. Scary stuff, but not terrifying, and I kinda got used to it after a while. Recently, it's gotten really bad. The first time it changed, I was laying on my side looking out across my room. The familiar pressure on my side started building up, and I glanced over to the center of the room. There, on the floor, I can see something or someone crouched down on all fours, and as I try to make out any distinctive features on it, it bolts and dives underneath my bed. I can't move or look down at it, but I can hear it. It moved on all fours, but it looked human. Nothing else happened that night, but not long after, I experienced something just as terrifying, if not more. I was laying down resting when a pale, withered hand appeared from under my bed and violently tried to grasp at my face. Another time I couldn't see anything, but I heard a low female voice behind me whispering, "You're not gonna make it," and then giggling afterwards. Then came my most recent couple of experiences. A couple months ago, I had just gotten home from a busy day at work, and I laid down to take a rest. As I was drifting off to sleep, I began to feel that same familiar, unwelcomed pressure. I got frustrated because I wasn't exactly in the mood to deal with whatever was about to happen. I just wanted to rest and not see terrifying stuff, so I kinda struggled against it and tried to force myself awake. However, that was a big mistake. I don't know why, but me fighting against it just made things a lot worse. I looked up into the center of the room, and there it was. It was tall, thin, shoulder-length hair, gaunt with blood-red skin, and its eyes had this bizarre luminous look to them, like a light as it's slowly going out. I could tell it was female by the build of its body, but this thing was angry, and it started walking towards me, shaking its head so rapidly that it became impossible to tell if it had 2 eyes or 4, and it was screaming in anger at me. The scream sounded like a cat in pain, and when it had almost reached me and was only inches away, it vanished into thin air, and I was finally able to move again. The last time anything happened was this week. I had a long and busy work week, so a couple of days ago I crashed out to recover. During this sleep paralysis episode, I had multiple pale hands reaching out from under the bed, grasping at my face. And that same female voice appeared at the same time and said in a dismissive, almost mocking voice, "I've had many people carve my name in their chest." I have zero idea what that means, and trust me, I've looked. I guess if this isn't my mind playing tricks on me, then the Red Lady just likes being cryptic about who she is. If anyone has come across something similar to this in folklore or just in general, I would really like to know.